Hello, everybody. Chris Lee and Chase Robinson of Southeastern 16 ready to talk some Georgia football ahead of the huge showdown with Alabama. When we talk Georgia, we go to my good buddy Anthony Dasher of UGAsports.com. I've known Dash for about 20 years, been a good friend. Dash, thanks for joining us on a busy week, my man.
God, it's my pleasure. It's definitely been a busy week. We'll get busier.
It has. Well, what's the vibe around Georgia? Because from a big picture standpoint, this team was – in an era of college football parity, still regarded as the best team in college football coming into the season. You look at the predictive models, everybody had Georgia 3 to 5 points better than whoever was at number 2, depending on where you looked. Georgia slipped a little bit in those rankings since then. I don't know that means anything. We're 3 games in. I'm not really sure how you compare, Tennessee blowing out Kent State to Georgia beating Tennessee Tech, but that's the world we're living in. Is this team the dominant team that everybody thought could be? Do we not know yet? Or is it just a thing where, hey, Georgia's taking care of business? Kind of, the Kentucky game was maybe a little bit concerning, but what's your take on this team in terms of, is it the team that everybody thought we'd see before the season started?
Well, I definitely think it's a work in progress, especially on the offensive side. You mentioned the Kentucky game. Weird game. They've always seemed to have weird games in election. Number one, for whatever reason, you see games much like what we saw 2 weeks ago. But the offense, and the game again, it was just strange. I mean, Kentucky, the first half, I think they controlled the ball for pretty much the entire first 30 minutes. I think Georgia had like 22 offensive plays. That said, they didn't do much with those 22 plays, when they had them. And even going back to the Clemson game, that's 2 games right there against FBS team that Georgia's only scored 6 points first half in each one. And I think that's it's the biggest concern right now. And, the offense has been, except for the second half against Clemson. I don't even take the Tennessee Tech game in account, whatsoever. But, it hasn't been a real rhythm yet. And I think part of that, again, is due to the fact, Carson Beck is still learning some of these receivers a little bit. There's no safety blanket like Brock Bowers and no safety blanket like Ladd McConkey. His two receivers he was most comfortable with, the last 2 seasons. So there's been some adjustment there. So that's probably, I think, the main thing. That's got George fans a little nervous that the offense hasn't really taken off yet, like I think most people thought it would.
With this matchup Saturday against Alabama, who Alabama's a team as well, who I think was still trying to figure out exactly what their identity is, what their, what they can do offensively. But for Georgia's defense, I mean, I think there's some spectacular pieces in the defense for Georgia. But this is obviously going to be a big test for them, Alabama offensively. What do you make of that matchup of Georgia's defense going against this Alabama offense?
It's going to be fun to watch. I mean, Alabama, as you know, I don't know how the exact stats in front of me as far as their explosive plays go, but I think I saw one stat that what of their 21 or so touchdowns, I think 14 have taken only 4 plays or less. So that's a huge concern for a Georgia team, which again has been pretty good so far, limiting explosive. But at the same time, they have not faced anybody with the offensive firepower, in my opinion, that Alabama has. Although Clemson again has played pretty well the last couple of games, I don't think they quite match up to what Alabama could kind of throw at you. So to me, that's going to be probably the biggest deal with this ball game. It's just who controls. Georgia need to control the explosive. On the flip side, Alabama needs to kind of try to win the turnover battle. Whoever wins those 2 battles, I think, will be the team that comes out on top.
One way to keep Alabama from scoring is to run the ball and control the clock and keep it out of their hands. Best guy to do that seems to be Trevor Etienne. Of course, he missed the first game with a suspension. The Tennessee Tech game, I'm not sure what we learned. In Kentucky, they just struggled. How much does he help him? How much do you think Georgia will be able to run the ball against Alabama?
Well, they better run the ball, because they don't run the ball, then play action pass kind of goes out the window, and you might see an offensive performance similar to what we saw against Kentucky. But what Etienne does, though, what we've seen in the 2 games he's played, he's one of these backs that has the ability to make an offensive line look a lot better. He can make guys miss. He can put a little juke move in the middle of the line and pick up extra yardage. So I think from that standpoint, he's going to be a huge factor in this ball game. I do think you'll see Georgia be more effective running the ball. I think the offensive line has taken was given a beating last week, by coaches. They were really put through the ringer a little bit. So I think you'll see the offensive line respond, be a little more physical than they were, against Kentucky. But Etienne's going to be a huge part, not just running, but also catching the ball out of the backfield. But there are two other guys, too, that I think Georgia wants to, get involved. And one is Branson Robinson, who missed all last year with a ruptured patella tendon, and true freshman Nate Frazier, who's been a pretty exciting back when he's been used this year. So I think those three guys will be leaned on quite heavily come Saturday night.
As far as injuries go, there's been several across the board for Georgia. Any idea on some of these injuries? I know Mykel Williams, one of those.
Mm-hmm.
I know Tate Ratledge is out, but any idea on some injuries heading into this Alabama game?
You mentioned Mykel. He's one of the ones that Georgia fans are hopefully can get back after taking the hit in the Clemson game. Now he is doing some running. He's doing some pass rush drills. But he's only really been back to practice full, for one day, and that was I believe Monday. So Georgia could definitely use, and I'll put it that way. They will get Warren Brinson back, who's one of the defensive tackles, a key part to the defense, who has not played the last two games. And also, sophomore Jordan Hall, former 5-star, I think had the chance to play in this one as well. And that will really help a defensive line, depth of a defensive line, which against Kentucky had 3 guys take over 50 snaps. And if you've obviously seen Georgia play over the years, that's something I don't think we've seen a couple of times since Kirby Smart has been here, because they like to rotate guys in and out. But thus far, those injuries have not been able to do that.
Dash, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to give you a second to think about it. The question is, once Georgia gets everybody back, how does this defense stack up to, the great Georgia defense of the past? Basically, everyone they've had under Kirby Smart the last 7 or 8 years, I think, would be in there. Before I do, just a quick reminder, This is brought to you by BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, even live odds and spreads during the games. Think you know your stuff? Get in on our $200,000 mega contest. Pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200,000 when the game's over. Head on over to our online casino. Get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. BetOnline, the game starts here. Again, the question, once they get everybody back, and obviously you just went through a litany of guys that have been out for this and that, how do you feel like is this your typical Kirby Smart elite defense that good luck to you scoring a point?
I think it can be a very good defense. I don't know if I would quite say elite yet, just from the standpoint of Georgia's had some pretty dynamic defensive players in past years, really difference makers. Jalen Carter in 22 was unblockable. You weren't going to, you don't have to double, triple team him to have a chance. And I don't know if Georgia has anybody on the defensive front right now that you can kind of compare. There's no Jordan Davis. Nolan Smith was a great, outside rusher. Trevor Walker. Guys like that. Again, they got some solid, I think, SEC players. Jalon Walker is a guy who can play both inside, outside, linebacker. They're trying to put him in a situation where he can be more successful rushing the passer. I think he's as dynamic as maybe some of those players, I just mentioned. But overall, I just don't know if I quite put them on the level of the two national title defensive, quite yet. Again, some good players. So the good players in the secondary, Malachi Starks, I think, is one of the best safeties you'll find, in the country right now. But I don't know, that team had some dynamic. Those other two teams had some dynamic players on it, and now I'm just not sure Georgia has quite that right now. Although again, it's very good. So I don't think Kirby's going to complain too much about what he has. But I just don't think they're quite as good yet, anyway, as what we saw those 2 seasons.
We've seen some really good Georgia-Alabama matchups. I think back to 07, 08 when Saban first came, going against Mark Richt there, Georgia, and then. Of course, we've seen SEC championships, national championships between these two teams. Alabama's gotten the better of Georgia in recent years. What would you say would be some things this Saturday Georgia needs to do to kind of get over that hump? Alabama beat Georgia last year, SEC championship. What could Georgia do Saturday night to get a win in Tuscaloosa against a team who's beaten them more in recent history?
It kind of goes back to what I was talking about. I think it goes back, to the offense and how effective Georgia can be running the football. If Georgia can have a semblance of success running the football, then that's going to, open up the play action for Carson Beck. And Georgia fans may disagree with me on this, but I think they do have enough weapons on offense to be successful. But they're going to have to mix it up. You're not going to be one-dimensional against Alabama and win this ball game, in Tuscaloosa. And the line has to be more physical, but you can say that about any game you play. But you just have to keep their cool. I mean, don't turn the ball over. Mix and match your offense. Don't be afraid to throw on first down. Do a lot of things to try to keep Alabama's defense, guessing as much as you possibly can. Just keep your cool. Which again, Georgia's played in some big environments before. A lot of these kids have played in some big games, and they know what the pressure is like. So just try to keep doing what you do in practice. That they brag all the time about the best team they play is the one they see during scrimmages every week. So they have a chance to prove that come Saturday night.
Dash, obviously Nick Saban and Kirby Smart worked together for several years, know each other well. How does Kalen DeBoer in place of Nick Saban change this rivalry both on and off the field?
I think in fans' eyes, I don't think it changes it, much at all. I think the big thing, I guess, the thing I'm wondering, most of all, when Nick Saban was the head coach, you knew Alabama was going to come through in a big game. They weren't going to be, you knew how they're going to respond, how they're going to play. There's a little bit of, I guess, question about that because this is really Kalen DeBoer's first big game, SEC game, and so how will his team, respond? Again, I think Coach Smart, we've seen with his team, typically they play pretty well in games of this magnitude, but there's still that little bit of unknown about Kalen DeBoer. He's going to have a chance to show the entire country that he can get his team ready. He can have them ready to play in a major big time, not just SEC, but a game, a national game that Alabama can be the same Alabama. And I think that's what everybody wants to see if that really happens or not.
How big in your mind is this game against Alabama when you look at the rest of the schedule? When there's Texas, Tennessee, Ole Miss also on the schedule, how big does that make this game? Where you want to win this one, obviously, because you got some really tough games also down the road.
Oh, I mean, Georgia's schedule this year is brutal as far as the conference goes. I mean, like I said, they've got to go to Texas. They've got to, go to Ole Miss. I mean, Tennessee is playing at lights out right now. That game's in Athens, but man, that's going to be a war, it looks like. So yeah, no doubt, this is a huge game. I think not just for Georgia, and keeping its foot to the ground as far as earning one of those 12 playoff spots, but also showing that that Georgia still, I think we talked about it earlier in the show. If Georgia was quote unquote down, maybe from what people expected, they have a chance in this one to show that no, that's not the case. They're still Georgia. They're still able to play to that kind of level that people expect them of. But yeah, yes, Kirby Smart about the schedule. He just kind of shakes his head because it's difficult. It's hard every year in the SEC, but some of these road trips Georgia has to go on this year, and they'll be kind of having to make up for maybe some of the previous season where the schedule wasn't so tough.
Dash, I'm going to ask you for two scenarios. Give me the most likely scenario of if Georgia wins, it looks like this. If Alabama wins, it looks like that.
If Georgia wins, I mean, I think you'll see them have I keep going back to the running game. I think you'll see Georgia, run for at least 130, 140 yards and Carson Beck, complete, say, 14 to 24 passes for 250 yards, a couple of scores. Alabama, obviously, it all revolves around, Jalen Milroe. I mean, Jalen Milroe has a game similar to what we saw in the SEC championship, able to, pick up, yards with his legs like we've seen him do time and time again. And Alabama's going to have a good chance to win. I think the game is close. I mean, I really do. And as cliche as this sounds, it's going to be the team that makes the fewest mistakes is the one I think is going to come out with a win.
Yeah, can't wait to see it. Dash, give us your pick on the way out, please.
Man, I go back and forth. I'm probably going to wind up picking Alabama in my official picks, but I mean, the more you talk to Georgia players, you kind of get the sense there's a little quiet confidence, I think, going into this one.
Yeah.
Players remember what Jalen Milroe said after the game last year about Georgia's players quitting, that sort of thing. So that's another little aspect of this one to kind of maybe pay attention to. But it's going to be tough winning in Tuscaloosa, though. I guess maybe I'm jaded because I've been there so many times, seen so many, tough games there. But Georgia's hasn't quite gotten over the hump, but we'll see.
I'm kind of with you. I don't know what to make of it either. I also picked Alabama. I took the easy way out because Alabama's playing at home. But I don't know that I entirely know what to think of these two teams at this point, which is a weird spot to be given that it's Georgia and Alabama, the two most visible programs in college football.
Yeah, well, we saw Alabama struggle offensively against South Florida. I mean, again, we saw Georgia just look terrible offensively against Kentucky. And that kind of threw everything out of kilter, I think, for a lot of people, especially from the Georgia perspective. Really don't know what to expect. And Carson Beck, does he have enough weapons? Can they move the ball, officially? Can they move the ball consistently? And, until they do, I think that's going to kind of be the storyline, for the team moving forward the entire year.
Dash, thank you so much for your time. Tell folks where they can find your coverage and what you guys are up to at UGAsports.com this week.
Yeah, find us on UGAsports.com. Find me on Twitter at Anthony-1. And like I said, we've got a great staff I'm very proud of. We got tons of analysis. We got like 8-9 guys who contribute to our site. And we'll if you like Georgia coverage, we're the place to be, because I guarantee we're going to have more than anybody else.
Yeah, you guys are the best in the business and good people too. God bless you guys. Thanks for joining the show today, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Have enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Yep.
That's Anthony Dasher of UGAsports.com. We here at Southeastern 16 do SEC baseball, basketball, football content year-round. Hit that subscribe button, enabling notifications so you get that. Caroline.smith at Southeastern14.com for advertising inquiries. For Chase Robinson, I'm Chris Lee. We are Southeastern 16, presented by BetOnline.